Yo, yo, yo. Hey, what's up? What's up? Back at it once again. A Koski of Fun Day. Kicking it for you and for yours. You know what I'm saying? And much love to you for watching, subscribing to the channel. Before I get into this, dog, give a shout out to my ancestors for giving me the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And also, I'll give a shout out to y'all for subscribing, watching, looking. You know, much love because the channel keep growing and stuff like that. I know I've been kind of slacking, but I'm going to get back into it. Now, with this being said, this comes from the Office of publicintegrity.org, publicintegrity.org. And the title of this, you know, is published August 21st, 2018. You know, so not too long ago, basically, you know, a little bit over a year ago. And it says, Black Americans are still victims of hate crimes more than any other group. And as the picture shows right here, for the Center of Public Integrity, they show James Byrd Jr., you know, the train wreck. I'll get into that. Jasper, Texas. Former Texas prosecutor guy James Gray keeps a 20-year-old CD in his desk that documents the graphic photos of one of the most vicious hate crimes in history. The day James Byrd Jr. was beaten, stripped, naked, tied behind the back of a truck, and dragged by 3 men from the Ku Klux Klan and dragged down a dirt road until he was dead and decapitated. When you handle cases like these, and that is inside the mind of a real racist, a white supremacist racist, and you see how dangerous those people are to the fabric of our society, you just become more sensitive to the race issue, Gray said. In 2009, Byrd became one of the namesakes for the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crime Prevention Act, a federal law spanning hate crime legislation to include crimes motivated by gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability. But just 100 hate crimes have been pursued by federal prosecutors nationwide between January 2010 and July 2018, according to News 21 analysis of court documents. Half of those cases involve racially motivated violence against African Americans, more than any other group. The numbers do not include the 100 of other cases prosecuted in the local and state courts. No single agency tracked those arrests or cases, although the incidents supposed to be reported to the F.B.I. by state and local police. Since 1995, Black Americans have been the victim of 66% of all racially motivated hate crimes, according to the F.B.I. data collected from local law enforcement agencies. You see it all over in all cities, in all the rural places. It's still with us, said Gray, who is now attorney of Caronville, Texas. While Black Americans have long been targets of hate, advocacy groups and victims told News 21 that the 2016 presidential election campaign and the election of Donald Trump may have encouraged more people to express their intolerance towards Black Americans. When this president campaign is a campaign of division and bigotry, said Richard Rose, president of the Atlantic branch of the NAACP. And so those people believing in discrimination of any kind gravitated to that campaign. After the election, they feel emboldened to act out these statements that have racial overtones in them. Christina Chowder was driving down an interstate in Houston with her 2 biracial daughters in the backseat last year when a car pulled up to her, and the driver opened out his windows. He started shouting phrases like, "Go back to effing Africa," and "Trump should have built a wall for you niggers," that will begin to swerve towards her, she said. "I've been living in Houston for my whole life and hadn't experienced anything like that," Chowder said. "There are different looks that came even with my children ever since Trump became president." From the historically unwelcome American South to the cities across America, federal hate crimes against Black Americans in recent years have ranged from brutal beatings and violent killings to burning of churches, firebombing of homes, and outspoken threats of harm. "It has always been that way," says Booker T. Hunter, 89, the founder and the president of the NAACP in Jasper, Texas for the past 40 years. "The history of Byrd's death, people are never going to forget about it. We haven't really healed from that scene. It's still going on." Targeted in most violent crimes. For those 50 federal hate crimes targeting Black Americans, News 21 revealed that hundreds of court documents and indictments to determine how often the perpetrators were persecuted under federal hate crime statutes. Many perpetrators had affiliation with white supremacist groups or invoked white power during the acts of violence and verbal harassment. During a Bible study meeting in Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, 3 years ago, a young white supremacist shot and killed 9 parishioners. Dylan Root was convicted on 33 federal hate crime charges and sentenced to death for the attack. In Duquesne, Iowa, the same year, charges were brought against a white man with a swastika tattoo who assaulted a black man and repeatedly kicked and jumped on his head until he was unconscious, according to federal court records. In June 2011, a group of white teenagers drove around Jackson, Mississippi, harassing black Americans. They found 48-year-old James Craig Anderson in a motel parking lot and attacked him, shouting white power. Security footage shows when Anderson tried to stand up after the attack, they ran him over with the pickup truck and killed him. 3 were convicted on 1 count of conspiracy and 1 count of violating the Shepard-Byrd Act. State Senator Barbara Blackman, a Democrat from Mississippi, said Anderson killing made her wonder how far we come. I am aware of that James Byrd incident, and each time something like that occurs, whether in Mississippi or any place across this country, if you're a student of history, you have a kind of conscience then that those kind of horrific acts should make you feel very uncomfortable, Blackman said. Intolerance against black Americans has existed ever since it was forced into slavery and targeted for racial lynchings and denied equal rights. Despite the passage of hate crime legislation and civil rights protections, blacks disproportionately face acts of intimidation, extremist rhetoric, and life-threatening violence. She said the country has not yet overcome that history. Reliving history of hate. In early 2016, Jordan Williams found an N-word written twice in his black permanent marker on the outside wall of his apartment in Denton, Texas. When my parents experienced this in the 60s and 70s, we talked about how could we be judged for the color of our skin, he said. All these years later, it took me really hard to hear what happened to me. I don't think they expected it to happen to me. Although black Americans are targeted in hate crime more than any other group, according to available data from F.B.I, only 2% of the total hate crimes are reported to the Bureau, according to the NAACP. That means no one really knows how many times black Americans have been victims of hate. Even the data that we can be used is misleading, and it's useful to see trends that may be from year to year, assuming that nothing changes in the term of our reporting and how we report it, says Kevin Buckler, a criminal justice professor at the University of Houston. I don't know if it's a true indication of the number of the criminal events that are motivated by hatred. Dina Marks, the Senior Associate Director of the Southwest Region Office of the Anti-Defamation League, said political tensions in America are prompting people to publicly act on or express their hate and biases. She said she has seen an increase of hate crime of victims in the incident at the ADL in Houston. Hate is always there under the surface, but sometimes people hate more openly, Mark said. We have a long, long way to go since the Civil Rights Movement. I think we've come a little way since then because of the laws, but I don't think as people we're much farther along. In 2018 report by the Center of Study of Hate and Extremism at the California State University, San Bernardino, found that the largest hate crimes reported to the police in the 10 largest cities in America increased by 12.5% in 2017, making it the 4th consecutive annual rise in a row and the highest spike in more than a decade. In 2017, anti-black crimes were among the most common in the nation, 10 largest cities, according to the study. On 1 June morning this year, 2018, Deborah Davis, a black woman in Clio, Michigan, and her ex-husband woke up to find racial slurs sprayed on the family's 2011 Chevrolet Silverado, including the word nigger and white power. I don't think that people that perpetuate crimes against black people has changed, Davis said. The only thing has changed, you have a person in the White House that accepts you saying that's how you feel. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has said the Trump administration and Justice Department are committed to reducing violent crimes and making America safe. As you know, hate crimes are violent crimes. No person should have to fear of being violently attacked because of who they are, what they believe, or how they worship, Sessions said at last year's Hate Crime Summit in Washington, D.C. So I pledge to you, as long as I'm Attorney General, the Department of Justice will continue to protect civil rights of all Americans. We will not tolerate the targeting of any community in our country. Since 1995, Black Americans have been targeted 34.6% of all hate crimes, according to the F.B.I., despite making up only 13.2% of the country's population. Furthermore, only 12% of the nation's police departments report any hate crimes to the F.B.I. in 2015 and 2016. A News 21 analysis of hate crimes reported that to the F.B.I. from the range of 2012 to 2016 determined that, on average, 16.6 million Black Americans, or 39.5% of the country's Black population, live in a county that reports no anti-Black hate crimes in a given year. Many victims told News 21 that the authorities were skeptical of their claims and they needed a record of hateful incidents for the police to believe them and the prosecutors to pursue hate crime charges. Gregory Puffelholm, a student at Radford University in Virginia, spent an hour curled behind his bedroom door in February while his roommate repeatedly shouted the N-word, banged on his door, and threatened to slit his throat. He said people wouldn't have believed him if he hadn't filmed the incident. In today's America, you have to be ready to film and document it. It's not just brutality in order to change the system. We have to expose all versions of racism, he said. I was threatened for the first time in my life in a place where I live, home, where you're supposed to feel the safest. Radford University, that's him right there, Jeffrey Penderhouse, who attends Radford University in Virginia. Alright. Radford University released a statement condemning the language used in the video to investigate the case, but Penderholm's roommate was allowed to remain a student. In every election cycle, there's an increase of intolerance and racial hatred, says Steve Spritzer, CEO of the Michigan Roundtable of Diversity, in his conclusion. The last presidential cycle it seemed higher at a higher level, but the difference is it's not stopped. Even though this person got elected, they are speaking hate with a great hatred and inspiring people to be hateful. At the National NAACP Conference in July, Leon W. Russell, chairman of the NAACP board, said, "Xenophobia, the fear of others, has surged in the past 2 years. White supremacy is being espoused by people who have served and are serving in some of the most important positions in the nation, and once again," Russell said, "the White House has become a sanctuary for vile thoughts, hate, and fear. Honestly, we see a retreat facing the gloom of the dark days we thought were past." In July 2015, about 15 members of a group called Respect the Flag went on a 2-day joyride across Paulding and Douglas counties in Georgia with a handful of pickups trucks decked out with Confederate flags. On that day, Melissa Alford happened to be hosting an outdoor party with her 6-year-old grandson when a group showed up shouting threats and racial slurs while pointing a loaded shotgun at the crowd. She said she could only focus on getting the kids inside safely. "When I seen that shotgun, all I could do was yell in the yard, 'Get the kids, get the kids.' Because we had a bouncy house full of kids," she added. "And when they said," one of the guys yelled, "We'll shoot them kids too." Georgia doesn't have a state hate crime law, but members of the Respect the Flag received an increased sentences when they were convicted for added charges of participating in a criminal street gang activity after 2 others allegedly agreed to testify in prosecution as part of their plea agreements. Their actions were motivated by racial prejudice, which in the view of the court, aggravates their punishment, Judge William McLean said during the pair sentencing. Despite Georgia's lack of hate crime legislation, McCain said, it is prudent for the court to consider the motivations of the persons when committing a crime when they are convicted of and face sentences. Historically targeted by hate groups. Racial intolerance against Black Americans has persisted for decades. Burning of crosses and public lynchings were common practices by the KKK, and organizations have made these tactics more to intimidate black Americans over a century. The Southern Poverty Law Center advocacy group that tracks hate and bigotry towards maligned communities has documented 72 known KKK active chapters in major cities across the country. The KKK has seen a decline in overall membership according to COP. The number of KKK chapters has dropped from 130 to 72 last year. According to the original Klan's oath of 1995, attained by News 21, Klan members pledged their allegiance to the Aryan race and signed an oath swearing to the enemies of my race, to my nation, no matter how high and powerful. They pledged swift and merciless justice, and with the fullness of the day of reckoning shall arrive. Thomas Poole, the current imperial wizard of the original Knights of America, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, insists the Klan is not rooted in hate. He said the KKK has an unfair negative connotation, and many crimes were attributed to the Klansmen that weren't committed by many members of the Klan. If you join the Klan because you hate anyone, whether it's blacks, Hispanics, Jews, Orientals, even homosexual or race mixers, you're joining for the wrong reason, said Poole, who wears his Klan cloak whenever he's publicly discussing the group to hide his identity. Hatred does nothing. We're not in it to hate anybody. We're in to look after our own. The Defamation League Center on Extremism found white supremacists and far-right extremists accounted for 59% of all hate and extreme-related fatalities in 2017, and an increase of 20% from 2016, according to the ADL report released this year. Poole, 27, has been a member of the Klan nearly all his life. He joined in the late 70s when he saw the classified advertisement for the group in a magazine. Poole accounted the Ku Klux Klan as contradicted by reports of racially motivated crimes, including the Byrd case, in which all murders were reported to be Klansmen. Daryl Davis, a well-known blues musician, said he regularly engaged in relations with Klan members, hoping to convince them to look at black people in a different light. He said he wanted to understand those who thought their skin color gave them superiority over someone else. He said more than 200 KKK members have given up their robes after this conversation and pushed them to rethink their lifelong ideology. Davis has collected 45 KKK robes, and he said many of them questions why he keep them. It's the history, Davis said. The good, the bad, the ugly, the shameful. It's all American history. If we don't destroy history, we try to learn from it. Hate groups have been rebranded in many recent years to appeal to a younger audience by creating a stronger online presence and limiting the use of controversial extremist symbolism, according to the 2017, the Year of Hate and Extremist report from the CPLC. One group committed to rebranding is the National Socialist Movement, the MSM, headquartered in Detroit. Now, in the sidebar here, this National Socialist Movement is headquartered in Detroit, and Detroit's the largest black city in America. Think about what I'm saying. Think about how disorganized the blacks are in Detroit to have a white nationalist group headquartered in the city where it's the largest black city in America. Let's get back to it. It's one of the largest and most prominent neo-Nazi groups in the country, led by its commander Jeff Soap. Soap said a white racist dying need to be preserved. He compares it to endangering the whale population and likened this effort to those environmental activists who work to protect the whale species. Anytime whites say they want something from white people and stand up for white interests, no matter how watered down it is or how radical it is, it's always called hate. It's always called bigotry or racism, Soap said. The movement held rallies across the nation to protest the idea that the challenge of an ethno state, including migration, hiring quarters, and miscolonization, that's race mixing. I'm not involved by hate on this or anything. I do with the organization. I love my country. I love my people. Hate group, hate crime, those are often buzzwords to get people to have a knee-jerk reaction to disliking us. It is essential what that is, said Harry Hughes, the public relations director of the MSM. Nobody goes around calling Black Lives Matter a hate group. In 2017, the Rally for the Right in Charlottesville, Virginia, leaders of both the KKK and the MSN delivered speeches and voting chants of White Lives Matter and that splits and go back to Africa splits them. The rally later turned violent, and Heather Heyer, a 32-year-old counter-protester, was struck and killed by a white nationalist who deliberately drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters. We think it's definitely linked to a lot of the rhetoric that we're seeing coming from the White House and throughout the campaign of disparaging minorities and people from minority countries, said Kofi Annan, the president of Fairfax County, Virginia chapter of the NAACP. It has really been feeding into a lot of the hatred that people feel now for them to repeat on the act that we see manifested in Charlottesville in a school of our kids. We have a long way to go. It has been 20 years since James Byrd Jr.'s death, but the people in Jasper told Northwest News 21 that not much has changed. His grave is now protected by an iron fence because it has been desecrated twice. Byrd's sister, LaVon Harris, now 60, and the president of the Byrd Foundation for Racial Healing, said, "People need to remember what happened. When I was going to school in history, I heard about the lynchings and things like that, but never thought to live one in reality of 1998. Harris said. Billy Rose, the sheriff in Jasper, when Byrd's dismembered body was found on Huff Creek Road, he said he saw a trailer that looked like burnt rubber. But once I got to look and you realize that wasn't rubber in the road, he said it was flesh and blood as part of a human being, and that this long trail followed a couple of miles was actually part of a human being. The body of Byrd, stripped of his clothes, changed by his ankles to the bumper of a pickup truck. Byrd's skin was burned off his body as he was dragged 3 miles down a dirt road. The men who were members of the Ku Klux Klan dragged him until his body split apart and dumped his severe tussle in the front of a black American cemetery, returned home and washed the truck. 3 men were convicted of the murder of Byrd. Lawrence Russell Brewer, who was executed in 2011, the first time in Texas a white person had been executed for killing a black man. John William King, who was on death row, and the third man, Sean Allen Bradley, was sentenced to life in prison. Barry was driving the truck that dragged James Byrd. The real problem was getting an all-white jury to convict a white man for killing a black man in East Texas, said Prosecutor Gray. I made a mistake. I let one guy get on the jury that should have cut, and the other guy was the reason Barry got life instead of the death penalty. When the jury went off to deliberate, Gary said, he overheard the dead jury saying, "What's all the ruckus about? He's just a crackhead nigga. Barry will be eligible for parole in 20 years. You have a freedom to speak your piece, but you don't have the freedom to kill because people don't agree with you or you're speaking of," Byrd's sister said. America is divided now. We have a long way to go. And there you have it. You know what I'm saying? There you have it right there. Even though all this hate crimes is going on in America, for the umpteenth year they've been keeping stats on hate crime. The black community is the #1 target of hate from all different groups. Not just white supremacists either, from all different groups. So, we still hit the #1 bat on that one, #1 spot. And another thing, too, was kind of crazy is that, as old dude stated, they, in Detroit, you know what I'm saying, right here, it says, one group committed to rebranding it is the National Socialist Movement. National Socialist Movement, headquartered in Detroit. It's one of the largest and most prominent neo-Nazi groups in the country, led by its commander, Jeff Slope. Now, as I said before, Detroit is the largest African-American city in the United States. How in the hell do you have a neo-Nazi group there, the largest neo-Nazi group there? So you got to think about it. Unless they deep inside the city government, you know what I'm saying? Deep inside the police force, even with a black police chief. You understand? It's things like that. They outside the county, you know what I'm saying, in Oakland and other counties like that, you know what I'm saying, keeping blacks south of 8 Mile. Things we got to think about. We got to get out these integration fantasies. Like I said, we still the number one target to get targeted on, get dumped on for hate groups in this country. And there's no love for us. There's no ribbon ceremony and none of that stuff like that. It's just like keep on pushing. Anyway, this is Akoski, a fun day. Saying peace. Subscribe, hit the channel because we do Black History here all the time, baby. Peace.